Startups begin in communities across the country.
Why does Silicon Valley get so much credit? My name is Nick Kastner.
And I'm Caitlin Clays. We're interviewing the people building startup communities across America.
But in the areas no one is talking about, the middle.
This is the Ecosystem Builder Podcast by mug.news.
This is Nick Kastner, and I am here interviewing an ecosystem builder out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We're talking with Khalif El-Amin, who is the co-founder of the Young Enterprise Society. And their kind of tagline and website is "Follow the Yes." And I love seeing these programs that engage young people. So as I was doing research beforehand, I was just so looking forward to this conversation. So Khalif, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. So to start with, if you could even just like kind of break down the Young Enterprising Society's mission and begin to kind of touch on all the programs within it, I think that's just a very good place to start. So what is like the goal Young Enterprising Society is looking to achieve? Yeah,
so Young Enterprise Society, our mission is to mobilize resources. So I guess I'll kind of start with the backstory as to how we came to it. Born and raised here in Milwaukee, went to a local school here, played basketball, was, very fortunate to be a, co-captain, state champion, went up to was UW Stevens Point, where I continued to play ball, got my, graduated there. When I graduated in 2009, the intent was that I was going to take over my brother Q and our dad's social service agency, which he's been owning for since 1985. So as I started working in the company a couple years, I noticed that line of work was more so a passion of my dad's than mine. So then about 2011, 2012, my older brother Q and I, we started bouncing ideas off of each other, and we're like, hey, I went to Stevens Point, came back. He went to UW-Madison, came back. And we have these connections. But how can we mesh all of them, make them work? Mm-hmm. So it was right around my birthday. We ended up having I ended up having a party, and it was ended up being 350 people that showed up.
Sounds like a party,
so, like an event or like a production. But that was that light bulb moment where it's okay, we one, we have some juice and some influence, but then two, how can we make that more productive? And, monetize that so that people aren't just, coming to a spot, turning up, having a good time, and then going back doing whatever it was that they were doing. So we started coupling those events with community give back events. And one of those events were free haircuts for kids. So we had friends who were barbers. We would go into certain settings, talk to the young men about hygiene, self-care, self-worth, things like that while they got, free haircuts. And when we would be in those settings, we noticed that the students were still being taught the same way that we were taught. So then that grew out our STEAM program. So, you hear STEM, but we actually include the art. So science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And we started doing our STEAM program in 2013. And since that time, we've been very, very blessed to teach over 3,500 students in 8 different states through that program.
Wow. Yeah. It seems like in that story, there was a lot of, I guess a lot more to it, that it went from just the one party in Milwaukee to now, you have these programs helping students across the nation. To start with, what about, I guess, this issue of giving back to our youth? How did you land on that? Was there something growing up that you kind of look back on, or a specific mentor you had? How was that the issue that you and your brother put your heads together to
Yeah,
solve?
I mean, we knew that, in order to, and for us to see the future, how we wanted to see it, we had to, influence that younger generation. And we were like, hey, it's new technology, new innovation, new way of learning, new way of teaching. So we're like, hey, we've always been the type to be, kind of tech savvy, and, just curious in a sense. I share this story kind of often, but when me and my brother were growing up, he was the type where we'll be playing PlayStation or Sega Genesis, and he'll just start he'll pause the game and just start taking the controller apart, cause that curiosity. So, just giving those young folks the access and exposure, to information, to resources, and to knowledge, so that they can, just spark that curiosity and be as successful as possible.
Yes. Yeah. How do you, when doing that, how do you define a success story, if you will? Like, is there something a kid has said, or after doing this for quite some time, what has been like, what are those moments when you're like, this is working just like we want it to?
No, that's a good question. So in addition to our STEAM program, we have what's called the Blueprint, which is a business accelerator for adults with tech, e-commerce, or advanced manufacturing startups that we started back in 2018. So we had a group of students in a local high school that we were teaching back in 2016 through our STEAM program. They were, great students, went through our program, and then fast forward 3 years later, they were, they're now entrepreneurs, and now they created their own e-bike manufacturing company called New Way Innovation. So I'll shout out Bryce and Willie. So just to be able to start off teaching students in a STEAM setting, and then they have our number, have our emails, stay in touch. And then we have this program that they can further, be helped with. I think that's one of the success stories that just pops out, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just very cool to hear about all of this. So when working on the STEAM program, and especially, so my girlfriend is a high school teacher, and she comes home all the time from school just talking about the disengagement level with our youth today. You touched on when describing STEAM. Like a lot of this isn't taught in a traditional high school. How do you guys go about like implementing the curriculum, and is it like an after school program, or is it integrated into a high school?
Yeah, so I would say every school is kind of different. Primarily, we are implemented, during the school day, but we have had some schools where we would, come in after school. But we've had it to where we've taught winter session classes. We had it to where we come in through the lunch hour, during the day after school. But really, we've been very fortunate to be around or get connected with influential students and or influential teachers. So once they know what we do, then, we can send our, one pager or our pitch deck over, and then they can be like, hey, take it to their, administrator and be like, hey, like, this is a good program. We have proven, traction now over the last 8 years that we've been doing our STEAM program. And so, it's just been a blessing. We just got to, keep pivoting and keep making it as interactive as possible. So, pre-COVID, I think one of our main value propositions for our STEAM program was that we literally met the students where they were. So we would bring in these technologies to the students, set them right on their desk or on their table and be like, hey, here's a drone. Here's, you may have went on YouTube and seen a drone, but, this is the motor, this is the propeller, this is how it works. So, just being able for the student to, touch and feel and break and build, those technologies, it just puts it more into perspective.
What's the story from taking it from just like one isolated community in Milwaukee to the 8 different states you're now working in? Like, what did that growth look like?
I mean, it was fairly organic. A lot of it had to do with connections and relationships that we built over time, and then having people from Milwaukee be, kind of transplants into those settings. So, for instance, got to shout out Yashi McGowan. She was from Milwaukee, went to high school with Q, but then she had moved out to Philly and she was working for the YMCAs. So we were able to, for 4 summers, go out to Philly and, do like a week-long STEAM camp, for the YMCA children out there. So, just really just staying consistent, being good people, and then obviously producing great work. I think that's been a recipe for success for us.
Yes. Yeah. And is there a specific type of community, if you will, like a metropolitan area or any other, Yeah. Is there a specific type of community, or is it just like any community that has kids interested about this will go to?
Yeah, any community that has interest, like I'll continue talking about Philly. Like when we go out to Philly, like we literally like cover the spectrum. We had one YMCA that was very, very in a very, very affluent neighborhood that we did our programming on, and then we have another one that was in one of the worst neighborhoods that we did our programming on. But our information, our mission, our vision isn't going to change. So, whether we're doing it with, 4 kids or 400 kids, we're going to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. What is the biggest problem you guys face when going into these different communities? Like I'm sure you need like a drone and the technology. You have to have the equipment available, and then you also would need like fast internet to make it work, and then also like a way to engage the kids and I'm sure there's others I'm not even thinking of, just as like a guy hosting a podcast. Is there any like what are the biggest challenges when delivering this type of programming to kids?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the biggest challenges that we've seen has just been just a lack of access. You don't know what you don't know. So it was a school here in Milwaukee, and we had been doing our programming for about 3 years at the time. And we went in there, and it was a group of 55 juniors and seniors that we were doing our STEAM programming with, and the young lady, she was very engaging, throughout the presentation, but then she raised her hand at the end and she was like, I just want to say thank you. And, we were like, thank you. Like, you're a really good student, this, that, and the third. And then she was like, no, thank you. Like, you guys are the first outside organization to come into the school and teach us. And I'm like, wait, what grade are you in? And she was like, I'm a senior. And I said, so you mean to tell me like no other potential resources or like has come? She was like, no, like you guys are the first. And this was second semester of her senior year. So
wow,
I think that's one of the main issues there is just, having qualified and authentic, instructors and people, come. So, yeah, we've done it in, predominantly African-American schools. We've done it in predominantly white schools, but I think the message stays the same. And when you're true to yourself, people can, they feel that and they react off of it and they trust you, with teaching their students.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so I definitely grew up in like my little like bubble and had like third parties coming to my high school and like public speakers and definitely had access to like not exactly this kind of thing, but like other like people like professionals coming in to teach me something. So it's very eye opening to I just like that is not the case for everyone. Yeah. So then the Blueprint program, and you kind of touched on this earlier that it's a startup incubator. Is that what you would call it?
Yeah. Yep. So it's a seed accelerator. So we started that back in 2018, and the void that was filled there was came from a large company here in Milwaukee. They had a tech event. Was about 450 people there, but only 5 people of color and no African Americans. So that got back to City Hall, and then some calls were made, some emails were sent out, and then we were contacted via some of those communications, and we obviously had been doing our STEAM programming, targeting primarily middle and high school students. So then we were like, okay, well, it's about time for us to, tap into the adult demographic. So, we put our proposal in, the city bought in, some other larger organizations like Northwestern Mutual, they bought in. Now we have grant funding from Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, some private donors. So through the Blueprint, it's we have 2 tracks. Each track is 12 weeks. So we have the idea validation track and then the market validation track. And upon successful completion of those respective cohorts, the the companies are able to receive non-diluted grant funding. So for the idea validation, they can get up to $5,000. And then for the market validation, they can get up to $25,000. In addition to, a lot of other ancillary resources, such as, access to our co-working space, discounted legal services, discounted tax prep, and then access to a network of mentors. So, we've been, really just grinding out with that. We've graduated 6 cohorts since August of 2018 with a total of 60 companies. So, we do 2 tracks a year, idea validation, and, we, just built a very strong team. We have an instructor, Miss Samitra Awansky. She's a professor at Milwaukee School of Engineering. She's an entrepreneur herself, and she spent like 15 to 20 years in corporate. So, and then we have Steph Crosley, who's supposed to be on the podcast as well, but couldn't make it. But she's our program manager. So, we can, I can be bad cop. She can be good cop. When the cohort, when they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or, staying on top of things. But, when I say we, Q and I, we've been very blessed to just be, just attract very good, just very good people with the same work ethic, same values, same vision, as us. And, we know that we couldn't do any, 10% of this, just by ourselves. So, definitely got to, give the kudos to, the startups that trust us, we going through our program, as well as, the team members that we brought on board.
Yes. Yeah. Of the 60 companies that have gone through the program, what's been the success rate? And I was kind of looking at it beforehand. What's the success rate, and what's the average? Is there an average type of company that goes through it?
Yeah. So the 3 sectors are tech, e-commerce, and advanced manufacturing. So we've had 85% of those companies be tech companies, and then 10 have been e-commerce, and then the other 5 has been advanced manufacturing. Yep. And then out of those 60 companies, I don't have the exact number, but the last I checked before cohort 6 graduated, we were at about 33 companies that were still functioning. So if you add on, obviously the 12 that just graduated, so we're about 75% of those companies are still rocking and rolling. I'll shout out Empower. They're a company. We have our cohort 5 and cohort 6 were 100% virtual due to the pandemic. But Empower, they're a media company, and they produced our demo day so that the companies could have a platform to share with potential investors and community leaders and friends and family. So, shout out Imani and Aziz, for, through Empower, and they went through our program. So it was only right that, we hire them to put on, demo day for them. So yeah, it's been great just continuing to see the growth. Obviously we know not all of them will be, successful and make it past year 1 or 2, but now with us being, 2.5, almost 3 years in, now we're starting to see those companies making those growth leaps. So it's been very good.
Yes. Yeah. Sounds just very exciting. How many of your students in the STEAM program end up going to the Blueprint program that you mentioned earlier? It's at least happened once. Is that something that commonly happens, that people are first engaged with your program as a high schooler and then segue into the Blueprint?
No, actually, that was more of a one-off type of incident or occurrence. But as we continue to, grow and keep doing it, I'm hoping that it will be, more frequent. But yeah, for the most part, we, our application is on with the website F6S. So that's how we, been. And then, we have a very strong social media presence. So that's how the word gets out about our programming. The pandemic actually was a blessing in disguise for the Blueprint program, in the sense that we were able to expand our programming worldwide because we made it 100% virtual. So the first 4 cohorts the entrepreneurs had to come directly to our office space. But then with cohort 5 and cohort 6 being virtual, we expanded it to, worldwide because it was, just over the internet. So we had companies from China, Russia, Poland, Venezuela, Nigeria, and Gambia all participate in the last 2 cohorts.
What's that like seeing something that you, I guess, partook in starting, even though you touched on the fact that there's a whole team behind this, but the fact it's gone internationally must be pretty crazy. As the guy who kind of helped kick it off.
Yeah, I mean, it's I look back at it, I'm like damn, it started with just a party, and now I look at fast forward 9 years almost, and we're all the pivots and all the wins and losses, and it's just it makes you really sit back and for me personally, it makes me like just enjoy the journey more and be more mindful and just kind of be in the moment, just enjoy it. It's like wow, like my brother and I, we built this, and it's continuing to grow, and like I said, everybody that's been involved, from the original Yes members to the current Yes members, just I just can't thank them enough, for continuing to fight the good fight.
Absolutely. Congratulations on all your success. So Khalif, one last question for you. You mentioned Blueprint coming out of, I'll paraphrase the situation, but that there was a classic entrepreneur event hosted by your city, and then there was only one winner of the event was a person of color. And that issue we've really tried to highlight on our show. And it's kind of the situation across entrepreneurship, of when economic development leaders plan these events, it is stereotypically white males exclusively. And it's cool to see Milwaukee seeing that as an issue and then solving it in a way that is scalable worldwide even. But for a community who is just starting to see that as a problem, do you have advice on what their first step should be or how to combat the issue?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with the word that you used earlier, is access or lack thereof. The event that I referenced, it was 400 people. It was a tech conference, or a 2-day tech conference. So there were, out of 450 people, there were 5 people of color, and those persons of color were, Indians, software engineers, things like that. There's no African Americans, no Hispanics. So, we just didn't have access to that, particular event. But I think moving forward, like you said, the city they're acknowledging that the lack of access is a problem. And, quite frankly, Milwaukee has, historically been known as one of the most segregated cities in the nation. So, I think through entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship can serve as an equalizer, and it can, level the playing field to a certain extent. So, and obviously, it'll ultimately help the economy as well, with creating jobs and more opportunities. So, I'm just thankful that the city and other organizations have acknowledged the problem and are willing to put their money where their mouth is to help solve it.
Yes. Yeah. And it's also very, fascinating. I don't know. Inspiring to see people like yourself with with their boots on the ground, doing the work you are. So for our listeners who may be curious about, more about Follow the Eyes and Yes and all the different initiatives you're working on, where would be a good place to send them?
Oh, yes. You can go to our website. It's www.followtheyes.com. So www.followtheyes.com. Social media, Facebook page is Young Enterprising Society. Twitter is Young E Society. And then Instagram is Young E Society.
Yes. Well, Khalif, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing about the work you and your team are doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It was a pleasure.
Now that we've learned about an ecosystem from the person building it, I'm going to link back up with Caitlin to clarify some jargon and take a deeper dive into this community.
Nick, what is up? How was your interview?
Caitlin, so first off, nothing's up. Thank you for asking me about my day. Yes. My interview with Khalif was fascinating. And just learning more about like the work his whole team does and how it started. It's just really, it's one of those programs where someone's actually moving the needle and like pushing for change, and you can see the change happening. So I just left the conversation inspired. Yeah, so overall, it was wonderful. Very happy to connect.
Totally. Like, what was your biggest takeaway? Other than just like that high energy, feeling inspired, ready to like change the world.
Yes. Biggest takeaway. I really liked, he talked a lot about touched on the Milwaukee startup community, wanting to expand into communities that they don't traditionally touch. And then, so they reached out to him and his brother, and that developed into a tangible program that they now run. And again, just like hearing that happen, that I think startup community leaders now are starting to hopefully realizing that same issue of like, oh, we host events and only white dudes show up. That's an issue. But then actually seeing them, like, it's one thing to like identify the issue, and that's like a needed step in the whole like fixing the problem, but then actually to like reach out and create a program that begins to solve the problem is, again, I was just excited talking to him, like, especially when you talk about like economic development and like the world we kind of live in. It takes so long to see change, and it was just like so exciting and inspiring to see the fact that like it's a relatively new program that's moving the needle. So tipping my hat to Khalif and his team. Wonderful.
Was there anything you had to look up?
Anything to look up after? Not necessarily. I think I said this to Khalif before we started recording. But I really, really want to go to Milwaukee. It seems like just a fun Midwestern city. I know you're from Wisconsin. Have you spent much time in Milwaukee?
I have. I really like it there. I went to a couple of conventions there. I volunteered there at one point when I was in high school. So I do like Milwaukee quite a bit.
Nice. Yeah. And I just think it would be a fun road trip. Emmy's my girlfriend, and it would be just a fun road trip for us to do together. And there's, especially kind of in a post-COVID world where you can go bar hopping and go to a Bucks game and maybe go to a concert and all of that. It just seems fun. So that's not traditionally, it's kind of like squeezing the answer into the question, because normally it's like jargon or like any textbook thing you had to look up. I just looked up Milwaukee. Seems awesome.
Totally. So do you have any final thoughts before we read out?
I guess I would like to re-highlight Khalif's comment on access, and that it's important, like, when you create a resource, it's important that everyone in your community has access to that resource and knows about it and knows, like, I guess the process of engaging, and they feel that they can be included in whatever that resource that you're creating is. And again, like, that's just like something I learned and I took away. It's one of those conversations, Caitlin, that it reminded me why I love podcasting. It was just like a fun conversation. I was able to engage and connect with someone I wouldn't have otherwise, and I just got a lot out of it. So that is it. Do you want to read us out, Caitlin?
I do. And then I also wanted to kind of say, I really appreciate that our podcast is creating a platform for people to listen to all of these resources that are available. And again, you wouldn't know that about Milwaukee if you didn't, shameless plug for our own podcast, but if you weren't listening to things that are localized, talking to ecosystem builders that are local and in that area, and you would know these things about certain areas. And so that's what I appreciate. If I were to move to somewhere, I enjoy hearing about where those specific spaces are, where the resources are. Yeah,
to kind of riff on that even, we had a mug.news meeting last Friday, and I was really just talking about how excited I was at about this interview. And Tom Chapman, who I guess what I would call the founder of Mug News, managing director, I don't know what his actual title is. But he was saying that he recently met with the Milwaukee economic development leaders, and they said that their goal is to have Milwaukee be one of the places that is most friendly to founders that are people of color. And Tom's comment, as I was kind of going off, and how amazing like Follow the Yes is, and how just the work Khalif highlighted in this program, it is again just very encouraging to see community leaders have audacious goals. And like the world only changes if you have audacious goals. So like more power to them, and I hope they continue to keep it up. So, do you want to read us out now, Caitlin, if you have nothing more?
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Ecosystem Builder podcast, which is a product of mug.news and hosted by Nick Kastner and Caitlin Clays. If you have any questions about today's episode, connect with us on Twitter at Nick Kastner, at Clays Creates, or at Mug News Official. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share with your friends. We release episodes every Wednesday morning, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a beat.
See you next week.